You're listening to Foreigners in Finland, a podcast that explores the experiences of people who moved here from abroad. My name is Felipe Silva. I'm originally from New York, and I'm accompanied by my co-host Jarrod Luxton from Melbourne, Australia. We talk about why people come here, some challenges foreigners face, and all the incredible things this country has to offer. We hope our discussions help anyone new to Finland get accustomed to life here and bring new perspective to Finns. Welcome back, everyone, to Foreigners in Finland. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about finances in Finland and how to get set up. Jared and I both were having a discussion and saying how it would have been helpful for both of us to kind of have some guidance when moving here. It maybe wasn't the easiest process, but it also isn't the most difficult. And I think with these tips, it will definitely help you out if you are planning on moving to Finland soon. And so, yeah, we have Jarrod here today. He's back with us.
Jarrod's back in the house.
Yeah, it's nice to see him again.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's obviously a great episode that you did with Diana. But I'm happy to be here and happy to talk about some things that I think would have been useful to know maybe 3 or so years ago when I came to Finland.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're going to have fun with this one again. Yeah. So I guess the first place we could start is when you're moving to Finland. It's very difficult to do anything without a bank account. So your bank account is how you log into basically everything. And so that's definitely the first thing you want to set up right away. Jarrod, do you know which bank accounts are easiest to set up when coming here as a foreigner?
Yeah, well, the banks require some identification. And I have heard stories of some foreigners having problems getting their bank identification. Don't underestimate this. You will literally need it to log into any digital service, whether it's government, even buying things online is much easier if you have this. So definitely get it. I use OP Bank, OP, and that's no like sponsored plug. I just actually use them. They have like heaps of services in English, which is actually at least in the Helsinki region, which is a nice one. But yeah, you need to have your banking services so that you can go and effectively unlock all of the different things in Finland. If you go to the doctor and you need to get a script for some medicine, you'll need to log in with your bank details. If you need to do something with your tax, you'll need to log in with the bank details. So this is your first port of call. Don't leave it till late because you'll be in trouble.
Yeah, plan it like your first day or two when you move to Finland. And I would say most banks offer services in English. It's definitely something you want to like double check, but all the major banks, I believe, do.
Yeah.
And I have Danske Bank. And yeah, OP is really popular, but I think Nordea is probably the biggest bank.
I think so.
Yeah. So maybe that would be a good one to kind of check out. And I think they've made it pretty easy for foreigners as well.
Yeah. And one actual thing that I'll add to that is that if you're coming to Finland as a student, check what student benefits you can get, because there are programs that the banks run to try and incentivize the students to join, and you can get some benefits and maybe some discounts through that. So check that if you come as a student.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I guess it depends on like what your banking needs are, and maybe each bank offers a specific thing that might pertain to you. But yeah, so once you have that set up, I think the natural progression would be to look for an apartment.
Yeah.
You know,
that might even be something that you do before
you move to Finland for sure. But I know some people use Airbnb for some time when they first move here, just so they can have an opportunity to actually go look at their apartment like in person. It's always like a different experience when you actually go there, as opposed to just seeing photos online.
Totally different.
Yeah. So if you have the opportunity, that's definitely a good idea. If you're coming as a student, though, you probably won't have that opportunity. You'll most likely be applying through HOAS, or if depending on what school you go to, they might have their own housing services. At Aalto, it was. Do you remember what the?
I don't remember the name, but they had like you could go through HOAS or you could go through the Aalto version. And effectively, it's just a program that organizes and maintains and manages the student accommodation, of which there is quite a lot across at least the Helsinki region. But also don't underestimate that, because there are like really nice HOAS places, and then there are less nice ones.
Right.
So it's worth getting in early and trying to get in the queue because it's a queue-based system. And that way you can try and end up with one of the nicer ones. We've seen both sides.
We have.
Like between our friends group, we've seen both.
And Jarrod's not kidding. The queue is long.
Yeah.
So if you're starting up in September, you should be applying in April.
Yeah.
Even before that if you can.
Yeah.
And even when you find an apartment and you lock it in, it's even worth it to make another application so you can be on queue again to maybe get a better apartment in a better location or a newer one. So
yeah, and don't forget that they do offer apartments that they're not all like single bed studios. They have shared ones, they have studios, they have even family apartments because obviously studying is a bit more accessible as an older person, or not older, but sort of more mature person here in Finland. So they have apartments that suit many different things. So don't forget that.
Yeah,
you can sort of choose the type of one which you want to queue for.
Absolutely, and the prices for apartments, they can be as reasonable as like 350 euros a month, and they can go all the way up to maybe 800 euros a month for some studios. So they definitely have some flexibility with prices as well.
Yeah, and I think in general the prices will be based on location, like kind of how close you are to the center of the city effectively, and then what the quality of the apartment is. Is it super old? Does it need sort of renovations, or is it?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're registered in Finland, or if you qualify for government support, they also cover 60% of your rent.
Yeah,
up to 60%. Yeah.
But you need to check if you qualify for that, because at least when I first came to Finland, I didn't qualify because I wasn't on the right visa. So there are some visa considerations that you have to think about. If you're not a citizen, then you have to check if you're qualified for it. But definitely check.
Definitely check it out.
No one will tell you. This is, I think, a recurring theme for everything in Finland. No one is going to necessarily hold your hand and say, "Hey, you get this benefit."
Yeah.
You have to do a bit of digging and investigation, but do it because it's worth it.
And that's why we're here. We're letting you know. Yeah. We have a mutual friend who got the government support in his second year of studying. So it took him like 2 years or a year and a half.
Yeah.
But then eventually he got some help, which was better than nothing, right?
And it's 60% of the, like it's definitely worth
significant
if you can get it, for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, what's some of the ways that you can find an apartment if you're looking, maybe from abroad or if you're here in Finland?
Right. So we discussed a little bit about how you could find one as a student, but if you're coming here for work, there's a few ways you could go about it. You can go on certain websites like Oikotie, and that's where whoever owns the apartment will make a posting.
Yeah.
And then, Oikotie seems to be like one of the better ones here.
I think it's the biggest one.
Yeah. There are maybe a few others that you can check out, but I would recommend that one. And then there's also Facebook groups. So maybe sometimes people are moving out and they want to make their own listing, or someone's looking for a roommate. So that's definitely a good option to check out as well.
Yeah.
And we'll link those in the show notes. So you can
and don't forget to talk to people. Like, I think that's also, it's definitely worth, I think at least I've heard in like lots of different friends group, there's always a discussion of somebody's moving or someone's moving out and they might need a flatmate. So that also works here in Finland. So make sure you use your network.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't forget to talk to people.
You ask and you shall receive. Yeah. And then, so that's for renting.
Yeah.
And I guess like we talked a little bit about student, and if you're starting to work in Finland, another thing that you should keep in mind is that there is unemployment insurance. So when working, hopefully everything goes well. But if things take a turn for the worse, there are ways that you can protect yourself. And the unemployment insurance is pretty good here in Finland, especially if you opt in for like private unemployment insurance.
Yeah.
So one really big one is called Koko. And they have a bunch of like sub branches within that organization.
Yeah, it's related to the union. So for instance, Tech is our union. And if you're a member of the union, generally you actually get automatic membership into these unemployment sort of funds. But you don't have to do it that way. You can actually join just sort of by bypassing the union and just join directly. But I would echo what you say, join it. because at least for Coco, which is the one that I know, it's like 66 euros, I believe, for the year.
66 euros for the year, guys.
And that gives you a reasonably robust unemployment insurance.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer.
Do you remember what percentage of your salary do they pay?
I don't, but it's significant.
It's like higher than 50%.
Yeah, I think if you combine the total with the public cover, then plus with the private cover, it is above 50%. I believe so.
Yeah.
But it's a great system. It's very it takes care of the people that lose their jobs. But some foreigners, and I've heard stories about this.
We have stories.
Didn't know about it, and then like in the circumstances arose that they sort of were out of work and they missed out big time. So if you're a foreigner, make sure you sign up because you actually have to be employed for half a year for it to be valid.
So don't waste any time.
Don't waste time. Join up straight away. As soon as you sign a contract or you start, get in touch with your either union or I think if you just call one of the funds, they'll say, "Oh, it's not us. It's these guys." So they'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Good tip. Yeah, and then we talked about unemployment, and then if you're here long enough, maybe you'll start to look for an apartment.
Yeah,
and if you are thinking about looking for an apartment, Finland offers a really good savings account specific to buying an apartment or any type of home, which is called an ASP account, ASP. And they have some pretty cool benefits where if you deposit a minimum amount every month, you gain, I think it's 4%, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that, savings interest rate.
Yeah.
And then when you're ready to buy a home, you're guaranteed a loan by the government if you have 10% of the total asking price of the
apartment
home.
up to a certain limit. I believe the limits have just been raised recently, actually, in the capital region, because property, obviously, around the world and here in Finland has been on the up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's 215,000 euros. I believe is now the upper limit which you can borrow.
Okay.
So yeah, but it's a good thing to know because if you do plan to stay, you can get a real edge because it means that you don't have to have extra collateral when you go and talk to the bank about a home loan. So it's nice. The government then acts as your guarantee on the loan, which is always a nice thing to have.
Yeah, and it always gives you a bit more buying power as well.
Yeah,
where you can be guaranteed a loan at 10% instead of having to put 20. Yeah.
It's definitely worth looking into because I think there are options where you don't take the ASB. You can take different types of home loans, but in general, as a savings plan, it's actually really nice because you won't find a 4% savings rate anywhere else. So it's definitely worth looking into.
The catch is though, if you take out the money for any other reason other than purchasing a home, you don't get that 4%.
No.
So the interest rate only works if you spend that money on a home.
Correct. Yeah. So make sure you read the fine print. Yeah. But if you know what you're doing and you're reasonably committed to it, I think it's a pretty nice vehicle which you can use.
Yeah. One thing I think that we forgot to mention was if we're still talking about students. So after you got your bank set up, you got your apartment, it's a good idea to see if you qualify for any student loans.
Yeah.
Because the student loans in Finland are a gift.
They work quite differently to how they work in the States and Australia.
Very differently. we discussed this on our second episode.
Yeah.
But yes, interest rates are 0.02%.
Well, they were. I mean, interest rates are going up, but relatively they're very low.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they're above 0.05. So, but if they are, then yeah, but I highly doubt it.
Either way,
they're a great vehicle to get some money to help pay for your expenses, and of course you have to pay them back. It's not a grant. It's not free money, but it's a free loan basically.
But it's the cheapest money that you'll probably ever get.
Yeah,
because you're paying very little interest, subsidized I think by the Finnish government. One thing that I'll note here is that the student loans are meant to actually be used for expenses, right? You're meant to use it to either like help with your life, buy things which you need. It's not to pay the fees of school, which I think is one thing that if we have listeners from Australia or the States, quite often people associate the loans with then paying tuition fees.
Right.
That's not the case here. Most of the time now, some people do have to pay tuition if they come from places that don't have the relationships with Finland. But I don't think that's the point of these student loans.
Yeah.
So these loans are really meant to support your life as a student. So some people spend it, some people put it into like investments.
Yeah.
Depending on what their situation is. So, but definitely look if you can get it, because it's a good one.
That's a good point, saying that if you're coming here as a foreigner, chances are you're paying for the tuition. But then if you can somehow get registered within a year or so and then qualify for that loan, that would help you pay for the tuition.
Yeah, I mean,
but then I'm also thinking if you're registered, then do you get tuition for free?
It depends on your circumstances, and I think it's a bit too sort of detailed for us to dig too deeply. But I do know that, for instance, Finland offers many scholarships. So even to sometimes people that don't qualify for free education through the system, the universities are reasonably committed, I think, to trying to reduce those fees for everybody. There's many folks that won't get their tuition for free because if you're outside of EU or there's certain countries that have the relationships with Finland. In general, lots of the universities have scholarship programs because they're quite used to actually providing free education. And I think they're trying to continue that tradition, supplementing that. Because before a certain date, and I don't remember the date, actually education was free for everyone here in Finland.
No
matter where you came from. That changed as I think the belt tightening happened at some point. But yeah, I think the main attitude in Finland is that education should be free, and most of the services are set up to support that type of situation. Right. So just something to keep in mind if you're coming here as a foreigner. Yeah, so we mentioned that the student loans, they are quite often used for expenses, but some people actually put them into investments if they're not in the situation where they need to spend that money. That leads us into talking about maybe how to invest in Finland if you're a foreigner. In general, I would say coming from Australia, it's actually quite an interesting and different environment. So it's nice to know a couple of things. Felipe, what are some things that maybe people should know about when they're thinking about maybe getting into the stock market? Or we've spoken about houses, but what about other investments?
Once you've been in Finland long enough and you have all the necessary credentials, you're registered, you're able to open up a Nordnet account, which is basically a brokerage account, which is basically a place where you can buy stocks or different investment vehicles in the stock market. And so that's definitely something to look into if you're trying to build some long-term wealth. Definitely check that out. And here in Finland, they have two options. You have your AOT, which is the normal type brokerage account, and then you have the OST. And the OST has some tax advantages because whatever money you put into the account, you can trade without being taxed. You're only taxed once you withdraw money from that account. The catch to that account is that you can only put a maximum of 50,000 ever into that account itself.
And you can only have one, right?
And you can only have one. Yeah. And so with the AOT, you basically can put unlimited amount in there. But whenever you make a trade, you pay a standard of 30% capital gains tax. So that's across the board.
And one comment I could say there is that's interesting coming from Australia is that when you're doing some investing in a part of the EU, it's actually reasonably easy to sort of look at different investments across the EU because of the way that it's like set up to be borderless between those countries. So that's actually one comment that I'll make, that it was quite different actually from when I was coming from Australia. Much easier to look at investments in different countries as long as they are actually inside the EU.
Right. Yeah. That makes it helpful when trying to diversify.
Yeah.
I think lastly, we can talk about pension funds.
Yeah.
So when you are working in Finland and you're working full time, you're going to be contributing to the pension system. And basically the way it works is that the people who are working are paying the pensions of the people who are retired. And then once you've retired, the younger people who are working are going to be paying for your retirement. Hopefully, if there are enough young people. So that seems to be one thing that's been mentioned a few times by some of my Finnish friends, is that there might be somewhat of a problem with the retirement system because there might not be enough young people working once this working generation is retired. But yeah, that's basically just the way the system works. And Finland has a really big pension fund. I think it's one of the biggest actually in the world.
It's got multiple pension funds.
And so I kind of I hear the concern, but then at the same time, I'm also thinking that maybe it's not such a problem in the near future. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's a demographic problem. I mean, that's the crux of it. It's that Finland's getting older as a country, and I think the worry is that when pensions are made as a promise, right? If you work hard now, we'll pay you later. And I think the worry with young people here is that there's not going to be enough money to pay them later.
Yeah.
So I think that's some of the tension which they've had. It's an interesting comparison to make, at least back to Australia and I suppose the US too, which operates more on a savings-based retirement scheme, in that sense that you, instead of paying a contribution to a fund throughout your career, you privately save money in an account that you're not allowed to spend anything from. You can obviously invest and do different things, and then you use that when you're older. So it's a very different system. Problem is that that one is not so dependent on demographics. So you aren't relying on the young generation to pay for the older generation.
It's all about how much you've invested in your own retirement account.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And kind of what you've invested in. One thing to keep in mind here in Finland is that yes, a percentage of your salary goes to this pension fund. And I think the employer is also paying some type of
a contribution as
well. And that might be a reason why salaries in Finland are maybe not as high as in some other places, such as the States or Australia, because the employers have much more expenses to pay.
They have some burden that is associated with
That's how I understand it.
Yeah. I think in general, it's quite expensive to hire people in Finland compared to other places because you have quite a lot of, call them taxes, but effectively fees and things, overheads which you have to pay for. So maybe one other just last comment to leave people with is probably the salaries aren't going to be as high in Finland. They still are comparatively high if you're looking at like the world, of course.
Right. Yeah.
But compared to at least Australia and the States, you might not be receiving as high a salary in Finland than you are in those countries. But you have to, I think, and what I've been doing is balancing that with also the quality of life and the sort of work-life balance and these types of things that are, I would say, better in Finland.
Yeah.
So you have to balance those.
And your
things.
purchasing power.
Yeah.
I feel like with the salaries, you're still given a great opportunity to have a very, very comfortable life. Yeah. So I think that about wraps it up for today. We hope this was a helpful episode for anyone moving to Finland or thinking about moving to Finland. And yeah, if anyone listening is interested more on the topic of personal finance, I'm starting up a new channel called Money Therapy Academy, where I discuss all things personal finance. And so I'm going to leave a link in the show notes. If you are interested, check it out. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See you guys.
See you.